Uh-oh.
There we go, green. Hi everybody, an update for you guys tonight from the hub. I'm here with John Stallman.
Aloha, good evening.
And we have witnessed various meetings tonight, and we've had a chance to confer a little bit more and analyze some more of the signals we got coming in, and we're going to give you guys a kind of a little bit briefer update tonight, but kind of just going over what we know is different in the last couple of days. So thanks you guys for joining and watching. We're here at the hub, myself and John, and we're gonna give you guys a little briefer update tonight. So just to kind of recap a little bit of the day's events. I myself earlier went to a couple maybe recaps those in more detail for you guys later. The one I went to in the afternoon that people are probably interested to hear a little bit about briefly is the high cop meeting I went to about the helicopter noise. That was held at 90 Mile Gardens in Hilo, Kīlauea. And I won't go into a whole lot of detail here now because I think it probably deserves some more attention. You know, maybe something tomorrow or the next day I can talk in more detail. But just briefly, the high cop meeting in Kīlauea today was about 2 hours long, and there was brief statements by FAA, HDOT, and the Hawaii Helicopters Association, and then probably about an hour and 45 minutes, almost 2 hours of testimony from residents who fairly unifiedly complained about the helicopter noise. Some people offered some good suggestions, and maybe I can recap some of those for you guys in a later update. Some good ideas that came out of there, but there also was a lot of frustration and a lot of anger, and even some out in the open threats people made against the helicopter companies, because it was fairly obvious that people are very they're basically going crazy over the noise, you know, literally going crazy, where they're having crazy thoughts and making threats and that kind of thing. So it definitely was a very tense, intense meeting down there, the high cop meeting, and we'll report more on that maybe tomorrow or the next day as I kind of get things processed and have a chance to put it together for you guys. But basically, you know, the whole theme of the meeting was that people were really upset about the noise, you know, for lots of different reasons, obviously. Worried about safety, you know, but you know, basically it was about the noise. And the way that I saw it, there's kind of two groups of people who were there. There was a group of people who have been underneath the Pu'o flight corridor for the last 30 years, and there's people who have been under the corridor of the new eruption here in Lower Puna area. So it seems like right now there's like an intersection in time when people from Pu'o are still really upset about the enduring noise they've had for decades, and what they feel has gone unaddressed. Basically, they feel like they've been ignored that whole time. That's kind of where the whole high cop movement began, was back in Pu'o times, you know, after years and years and years of that. And this year, obviously, there's a whole bunch of new people upset about the helicopter noise, ranging all the way down from Leilani through Nanavale, through HPP, into Hilo, and, you know, areas around Hilo as well. So those two groups intersected today, and like were able to voice their discontent together, basically, and that was probably part of why that meeting was so intense. Thank you guys for joining in. I'll see if I can catch your questions in a way. There was no mention of drones at all during the whole meeting. The way the meeting was structured was that you had to, coming in the door, you had to sign up for either presenting comment or just going in to attend. And, you know, there was mention that while I was at the door that there might be a Q&A session at the end, but there was no time for that. There were 45 people who signed up to comment. And so that gave them each about 2 minutes. That was about an hour and a half of time, and obviously not everyone stays just 2 minutes, so that was basically the whole meeting right there. One notable thing was that Mayor Kim did stand up and speak on behalf of the citizens about how the long-standing noise has been an issue that he's been aware of for a while. So that was probably the most noteworthy speaker, apart from the, you know, literally almost 4 dozen people who were up there complaining about the noise. There was a lot of a lot of representation there. Our council people were there. Russell Ruderman was there. Eileen O'Hara was there. Ashley Kierkiewicz was there. We had Richard Onishi was there, as well as Kai Kahele and representatives from Tausig Gabbard and Brian Schatz's office were all there, as well as Fresh Onishi from the governor's office was there. So also along, obviously, with Hawaii Helicopters Association, FAA, Hawaii DOT, and then all the people, including HICOP. So that was kind of how the basics of it, without going into very much details of all of that. That did happen. There was a chance for everyone to be heard and complain about that. But the basic point of the meeting was to form a committee of 8 people, of which 2 are HDOT, 2 are FAA, 2 are the Hawaii Helicopter Association, and 2 would be members of the community. And that group would then meet and take into account all the testimony and suggestions and come up with a path forward that hopefully addresses those. So that was the whole goal of the meeting. So obviously nothing is going to happen there until they actually select that. There is a chance for anyone to submit written commentary for another 30 days still. So there's some time I can, or maybe someone else attended can post the contact information for that. And anyone is welcome to comment on that issue that's going to be ongoing for at least 30 days before they even form their committee and all of that. So that's kind of the timeline we're looking at for that. So that's all I'm going to say about the HICOP meeting for now. That was the first meeting to talk about today, and then the other one that's worth talking about for us is probably the civil defense meeting, community meeting held in Pahoa this evening at 5 o'clock. And I was not there for most of the beginning of the meeting. I did have a chance to go towards the end and hear a little bit of the Q&A session and speak to some of the USGS folks who were there with lots of people answering lots of questions and being very patient with us. So there's 2 ways we can do this. I guess we can go over the meeting first, or we can go over data first and refer to the meeting. You want to talk about maybe meeting stuff without USGS briefly, and then we can turn to science? And how do you want to do it, John?
Yeah, I mean, we should probably give a little bit of the social aspect of the meeting and then go into the science,
okay.
Since you talked about the other meeting with the helicopters. And so, they have this format for the civil defense meeting where everyone gets 2 minutes to speak into the microphone and ask their questions, and then they do all the answers at the end. And so it was actually relatively very mellow. A lot of people had similar questions relating to when can we go back to our houses? Will the mandatory evacuation zone end up being a never return to the zone near the fissures? Those kind of questions that we've actually discussed a lot. Like, will there be an area near the fissures that's just never inhabitable again? And people kind of pressing the issue, is that determination going to be made? And a lot of the answers were very much that the decisions haven't been made. As far as relaxing the restrictions of the restricted areas, the word is basically that they won't be changing their policy on those things until USGS weighs in on the issue to say that those places are safe. So again, that's the kind of, there's some relay of information that isn't kind of happening in the time frame that a lot of people asking these questions want to know. So yeah, just a lot of people kind of indicating how they want their community to be involved in these decision-making processes was repeated in a lot of the questions. So that was a big part of it, is that the people want to be involved in what's happening next and the decisions that are being made about the communities, Leilani in particular.
Was there a response to that? Did they say they would do that, or did they say it's going to stay the same?
In a way, they said it was going to stay the same, but they want to involve the community. And so there might be some indications of that. They did speak to kind of quelling people's fears that, you know, anything like land acquisition, which has been a topic that's getting mentioned a lot more now. Representative from the county, the mayor's office, said, you know, that kind of stuff does involve council decision making, does involve public's input. It's not something that would be handled just administratively. And so, you know, they did try to underscore that they want the community to be involved. But there was also kind of a stone wall that they're not changing the rules. Citations will still be issued. The placards are the same. So similar answers to how it's been, but overall the mood was more mellow than some of the other meetings have been. So, but as far as the science, I've been talking with Philip about it tonight. It was interesting to be able to talk to a few of the geologists from USGS, and also to listen to Tina Neal's presentation herself, scientist in charge. Just kind of, it's reassuring in a way to realize that most of the thinking and discussing that Philip and I have put into this is exactly the same sort of questions the geologists are puzzling about now. And so as it stands, you know, it's still considered a lull in the activity. The USGS does have total confidence in their reports that they've put out, that, you know, it's at this point, it's more likely that it's a pause, that they expect it might resume at any time. And kind of the same thing that Philip and I have been saying, there will be probably signals and warning signs if activity is about to resume at the fissures, or if new fissures are going to open up. So they're monitoring that closely. But most of what Tina had to say is reiterating we're in this wait and see period. And we can cut to the chase with that in one way and discuss more science, is that for USGS, there's kind of this maybe about a month time frame where, judging from other eruptions in the past, that it is quite common at all these different observed eruptions, they do pause, and the average is somewhere of a month or less. So basically they're saying, in their kind of way of looking at things, if it stays paused, stays quiet for a month or more, we're probably in the clear. So that's kind of how they judge it. But that judgment comes when there's no more lava in the vent. And at this time, we're still seeing lava in the vent at Fissure 8. So when do we start that clock, that 1 month time frame for it being phrased?
Hopefully
paused.
soon, but not yet.
Yeah, it's kind of like at USGS, they're about to start that clock, but they're debating, has the clock started yet, or do we need to wait and see a little bit longer before we get to that month's wait of, is it paused or is it POW? But overall, that's the same stuff that, you know, Philip and I have discussed in these updates, is the same stuff that they're discussing. But it might interest you to know that based on historical data, if it's paused for a month, we might be over POW. So that's kind of the time frame that they consider when they start that clock. And so maybe that's a good place to segue into some of the science. I don't know what you want to talk about first.
Yeah, well, I think that's interesting. Yeah, so I mean, and just because 1 month goes by and nothing changes doesn't mean that lava can't come back in and reuse that pathway and erupt 3 months from then, and they might still call it the same eruption at that point and decide it was actually a pause after all and not the actual end. So, you know, the definitions maybe, you know, I think I saw a comment from our discussions with a little bit with Les yesterday, you know, who said that, you know, maybe the definitions are kind of obscuring things a little bit, right? I mean, we're us deciding like when to call it over or not is not the same question as how does it impact people.
Right.
So the way it impacts people is not tied to, you know, what the USGS decides. It's over unless, of course, that impacts, of course, what the civil defense is going to do and letting you back in or opening your road or considering some timeline of it being over long enough for them to consider bulldozing a road or that kind of thing altogether, right? So that does kind of trickle down that way. But that's basically what you guys need to know, is the USGS is working with basically a 1 month clock, and it has maybe is about to start, but is debatedly hasn't started yet. So yeah, basically, I think that as far as terminology goes, like when you're still seeing lava in there, it's still a lull. Once the lava is fully out of sight, then it becomes a pause, and then the pause has to last at least a month. And then maybe it's not a pause, it was actually an end. And, you know, then something else happens after that. So, yeah, kind of following that, we can kind of turn to our tilt plot, or maybe what I was trying to find here earlier is a photograph of the last view I had of into the fissure, but actually I think I'm on the wrong thing here, but bear with me just a minute, you guys. I'm sure you guys want to see the picture. I only have basically one relevant picture right here, from Scott Wilson. So here's a picture from Scott Wilson. This was from yesterday evening, but you guys can kind of see fissure 8. You guys can see right in the middle there, a little red line is the last little spot of lava. And we heard that there might have been 2 pinpricks tonight, but I only saw the one longer line yesterday. Maybe that one long line turned into 2 smaller ones, but either way, it's not a whole lot. It's mostly crusted over. It's been described as like a sluggish pool at the bottom.
Puddle.
It's got a sluggish puddle, right? Here, dig this thing out. So, all right, I got my pointer. So there is a little spot of red lava right in there. So, yeah, that's the confirmed lava. It's hard to tell from this photograph whether that's actually flowing lava or like a glowing crack. You know, one thing that I'm kind of a little wary of is that we can have a crack. Once the lava drains down into the crack is likely to glow for at least a day afterwards, maybe a couple of days, until the actual rocks that were touching the lava actually cool below that threshold of not glowing red anymore, right? So it's like the rocks like in a campfire, a fireplace, or John mentioned like the heating element for your stove, things that can glow red hot but not actually be liquid, right? So that's kind of it's going to be a hard thing to maybe distinguish, if we're only getting like 1 photograph per evening, or 1 drone flight per evening, or what have you, or 1 released drone flight per evening, that kind of thing. So that's basically all we know about the fissure, is that there's a tiny bit of red in there still, and we can't tell if it's the lava itself. There is no glow in the sky at night, and basically by the USGS definitions, as everyone is commenting, that means that it is still erupting and still active. And as we're saying, that doesn't start to clock yet, right? So, all right. So let's try to not to get too behind on the questions here. I'm not going to do too much because we want to do fairly quick. But there's one question that says they're saying lava would return to Kīlauea, but I was wondering, could it really fill up again, seeing as it had caved in so deep? And you want to take it, or?
Yeah, I'll try to. So, how can the lava return to Halemaumau even though it's caved in so deep? And the question is, where is the lava going right now? And where is it going to build up and cause another eruption? And we know that we think most all of the lava that goes anywhere in this volcano goes to the summit reservoir, which is the shallow reservoir, which is located below the caldera in Halemaumau at some point in its journey, whether it goes out through the East Rift out to Pu'uo'o, or in this case recently it's come out to Fissure 8, or if it goes into storage in some other part of the volcano. We think most of the magma that comes into the volcano spends some time in that reservoir at the summit. And so that's the most likely place for anything to happen. And what they imagine is happening right now, or could be happening as things progress, and if the volcano is going to recharge, the lava will probably reinvade into all of that collapsed rubble at the summit crater. They think that the crater, you know, I think the number is something like 600 meters. It's collapsed downward. And all that rubble and rock is down there, and there's empty space all through the blocks of rock. And so as lava builds up in that summit area again, it will probably intrude into the empty space in the rubble, and the new magma chamber of the summit will begin to evolve in that pile of rubble that's in the bottom of the collapsed crater, which I thought was really interesting. So just because it's collapsed doesn't mean that it's like walling off the lava. The lava will find a lot of empty space and re-intrude into that. And the question is, as the volcano recharges, or if it inflates at the summit from now, are we going to see it just intruding and inflating at the summit, or is it actually going to break through and erupt at the summit? And so all bets are off at this moment right now. We can flip coins about most of these questions and have just as good a chance of being correct. But one of the potentialities is we could see lava erupt in the collapsed crater at Halemaumau sooner than we'd think. There's potential as lava intrudes into all that collapsed rubble, it might encounter groundwater is now invading into that big collapsed depression, and that could create steam explosions if the lava intrudes into there. And there's also an off chance of larger explosions, which USGS warned us about in their scenarios report for the summit more than a month ago already. And so, yeah, if that kind of answers it, even with it being collapsed, the lava is still under there to some degree, circulating in the summit area. And if it inflates, it can actually re-intrude into the rubble and start evolving into a new magma chamber. If that illustrates it a little.
Yeah, I can maybe try to say the same thing a different way. Maybe be useful to people. I mean, one thing to one way to think about it, I saw, I believe, I forget which post it was now, but there's a post that says that the bottom of the pile of rubble is now closer to the magma than the surface of the ground was before. So actually, it might be easier to push lava into that area because it's actually closer, and it's all cracked and rubbly already anyways.
Right.
So there's that. I mean, the one kind of caveat to that is that the caldera that we have grown used to seeing was lava kind of glazed over a similar collapse to the one we see that's been buried under there the whole time and just out of sight. So, you know, the whole time the summit's been a likely place for an eruption because all that rubble has always been buried underground there no matter where. In fact, the way that the caldera works is it, you know, goes through this cycle of collapse and refilling and collapse and refilling and collapse and refilling. And, you know, it's not necessarily a very ordered pattern where it happens, you know, in a nice interval, whatever else, you know, where you're getting, you know, we're surprised by how big a collapse we have now, you know, which doesn't quite, you know, fit our exact understanding of how we would have thought the cycle would have been regular, you know, but that just goes to show how much we have to learn still. But basically, it's done it before, as the other way to put it, right? You know, we've had big craters, the big caldera that are deeper than this one before, and it's all filled back in with lava. So just the fact that it collapses, you know, is just showing us how much was underground more than anything, you know, how much had built up over time in that shallow area under there. So just different, maybe slightly different way to think about it. But you know, it's not hard to have lava go back into the summit. No. The question that we all have is, can it get from the summit back into the rift conduit enough to get back either to Pu'o'o or beyond there to Leilani, right? And that's something that we just don't know right now.
And this can be this is the puzzle we're working on. We're trying to get away from saying, if this is so, and this could happen, and just try and demonstrate this is the puzzle. We don't know if lava refilling the summit will now be able to get through the East Rift and out down to Leilani in particular. So there's a chance that we're able to confirm by talking with Tina Neal and the other scientists tonight that one possibility now, this is the puzzle, is that if all the collapsing has actually ended up cutting off the connection from the summit to the Eastern Rift. And so that's one of the main puzzles we'll describe more details of, but we have to wait and see. But that's the puzzle. So.
Yeah. And that cutoff is of unknown strength, right? It could be a cutoff that's easily pushed aside, or it could be a cutoff that somehow becomes more permanent and allows someone to pressurize once again independently of the rift zone. And that's what we have to just wait and see. There's no way to predict that. What we're doing is analyzing the tilt, and we can turn to that now and look at our tilt plot today. And so here it is, our trusty USGS site with our tilt. And as usual, we'll look at the summit first, the past 2 days, and as usual, we'll look at our scale immediately and see that our scale is in the order of plus 1.5 to minus 1.5. So there it is. There's about 3 microradian range of the scale there. And what we can see is that over the past about 12 hours, from 6 a.m. till past 6 p.m. all the way over here, we have about a 2 microradian increase in inflation. And that on its own, it can't be taken on its own. You got to kind of look at it in more of a context than that. So here we are looking at the last week. And we can see that here we are, here's our 2 microradian increase. This may be one of our steeper climbs, in recent things. It's still a very minuscule signal. If we kind of go back to our zoomed out view, we've now gained 1 pixel down here, right? So that does matter when we're looking at these tiny, tiny signals, but it clearly doesn't matter nearly as much. It's not as conclusive as anything like this happening. And, we can point out that we had fairly large inflation also, within the last week or earlier in a week or over there, right? Coming up, maybe not quite 2 microradians, but maybe 1.5, somewhere in that range in there. And in that case, it turned around and went back down. So we're kind of waiting to see what's going to happen here at the end of this. Are we going to keep going up and up, and if we kind of keep going up and pass, let's say, a 5 microradian or a 10 microradian threshold, then we can say, okay, well, that's something meaningful. We can actually infer something from that. But with 2, it's still not quite clear this is big enough and significant yet, unless we see it kind of growing more and more and not turning back down, right? So that's really the question there. As far as the rift zone actually has almost an exact mirror pattern when you look at it, right?
Yeah.
So that's interesting, very interesting to us as well. So that is still what we're, inferring, that there is some connection, but it seems to be at least somewhat blocked as well, right? Because we're able to pressurize the summit while we depressurize the rift zone, basically, right? So that would indicate some kind of block between the two, right? And the fact that you actually see it mirrored in the exact pattern probably means that there's still some connection, whether it's just a pressure connection. It's hard for me to really describe that.
Right. You said it earlier tonight too, is that how much do we want to micro-analyze our micro radians, right? We're analyzing very tiny changes. We have to see if they become clearer patterns, more meaningful, significant changes. But we're giving a lot of attention to very tiny changes because it's all that we have to go on right now.
Right. So, but what I would put forth is if we had a full-on blockage, then maybe we just see a straight deflation without these little wiggles in it that correspond to what the summit would be, right? So somehow what's happening at the summit is still affecting down there, even though we see the deflation trend. We still see some signal of there's something trying to happen in there, connected to the inflation of the summit, whether it's faster or slower in deflation of the summit. So there's that. We can kind of look at them, and on the same plot here as we have been. It's not quite as obvious here. When you have a nice automatic scale, it really does look like almost like a wine glass on its side or something, right? Like a goblet on its side, except for this little bump edge right here at the beginning where it's not quite so orderly, which is interesting also. But just looking at the grand scheme of things, we're basically still looking at that little micro analysis of that last little pixel right there, right? That little pixel right there, going up, going down, and little wiggles in here.
And this is relevant, right? Because we're trying to fill the magma, right? And we need to have some indication on the surface of the movement of magma. That the inflation is one of the ways we do that, to infer that magma and pressure is changing under there. And so, to clarify, most likely the lava is moving somewhere in the volcano right now. It's not just frozen or in stasis the way I had described it before. They assume that there's always lava coming up into the volcano. This is another one of the puzzles. Is it constantly coming in or in episodes? So Phil and I are having that conversation too. But USGS, they assume that lava is coming into the volcano and it's going somewhere right now. The trouble is we can't see where it's going. We're not getting the signals on the surface of it inflating in the summit more than in the rift. Maybe we're starting to with this little trend upwards in the past 24 hours or so. It might be inflating at the summit now, but that's just the puzzle, is that if the lava is still moving through the system, where is it going? And they think that it's probably going into some storage facility or another within the volcano that we don't have signals of on the surface. So that could be different parts of the main reservoirs. The shallow and the deep reservoirs might be taking the extra magma right now that we're not seeing. They also think there could be empty spaces all along the rift zone, like literal empty void space between rocks where lava can kind of intrude in there, but it doesn't have to push anything or make any earthquakes. And even if it degasses, maybe the gas doesn't reach the surface. There's no little cracks to let the gas through, so we can't detect the gas. And so there's a chance that the magma coming into the volcano is being quietly, secretly stored away somewhere, and it's not giving us a signal of what area of the volcano it's moving into. And that's another reason why it's a puzzle. We have to wait and see if we get those clues. But it's interesting. So it probably is moving somewhere, is what they think.
Right. Yeah, and I think that fits exactly what we were saying before. And I mean, one way to think of the depressurizing blade of the rift zone is that it has empty space now.
Yeah. And
that magma could be filling that empty space. And but what we're seeing is not a clear signal of that happening. Because if there's empty space and you're basically pushing out some gas that's in there, you're not going to be pushing the rocks, which is what we can measure the signal of the tilt on the surface. So wherever it's going, it's invisible to us with the instruments that we have.
It's not deforming the surface. It's not letting gas out. It's probably going somewhere, but we don't have the clues from where we live on the surface.
Yeah. But I would say the one good thing is, our whole monitoring infrastructure set up to detect things near the surface where they affect us. So wherever it's going, we're very curious to know and figure out what that means for the future. But it doesn't immediately impact us as far as like wherever it's going, it's not here.
Yep. So don't worry about it, basically. We can't worry about it. It's just an unknown. Right? But it's not imminently about to affect our lives on the surface. We scientifically just don't know where it is right now. Yeah. I don't know if that lowers the anxiety level. It's kind of
so that's why we're still in a wait and see, and that's why I still have to see some sign of magma, right? Still show me the magma, show me some inflation signal or some gas signal or some earthquakes or some deformation or anything, right? And it's going to happen inevitably at some point. It's a volcano. All it does is make magma and erupt it out somewhere at some time, right? It's not going to do that. I mean, it's not going to stop doing that in any of our lives,
Maybe we can go into some of these fun facts I learned today. They're related to these questions. So I was able to get some of their estimates for how much lava is extruded. That means how much lava is spread out on the surface of Puna right now. And it's lower than I had been thinking in some of our other updates. They said it's somewhere more close to about a cubic kilometer. So we're talking 500 million cubic meters has come to the surface. And so we've got a half a cubic kilometer of lava erupted. And that amounts to maybe 3 or 5 years of pu'uo'o flow. So compare that. In less than 3 months, we erupted as much as it might have erupted from pu'uo'o in 3 to 5 years. So really fast. But that half a cubic kilometer of lava doesn't quite equal with the summit. The summit has collapsed over 800 million cubic meters. So almost a cubic kilometer has collapsed at the summit. Okay, and so we think that probably the amount that collapsed should be really close to the amount of lava that was withdrawn. This is another part of the puzzle. We don't know.
Right. So that's a maybe. I'm throwing a maybe.
That's a maybe because there's solid rock in the magma chamber too that didn't drain out. It's not liquid. It'd still be up there. So there's some error there, but it's collapsed almost a cubic kilometer. Only a half a cubic kilometer has come out on the surface. So the reasoning is that difference in magma is in storage somewhere now, between here and the summit, or possibly in the deep storage compartments, the deeper magma reservoirs under the summit. But that I just thought was a pretty interesting part of the puzzle.
Let me throw in the earthquake, yeah?
And the earthquake.
So another big missing piece of there is the 6.9 earthquake and how much space it created
And we don't know
within the
how
rift
much
zone.
space,
So when John is talking about this extra space in the rift zone, then it's possibly in large part created by that 6.9 earthquake.
Yep, most definitely.
Which, speaking to the scientists tonight, they're having a really hard time calculating the volume of that, because what they have is GPS data, which shows motion of the ground. It doesn't show how much the ground moved in total. And there are some other technical issues with kind of converting the information they have into that on a ground surface, and at some point underground, some depth underground, how much space was created. So therefore we don't have a volume at all of how much space was created by the 6.9 earthquake.
Right.
And when you consider that it might have been an area from as far up as Pu'o down to Leilani and possibly beyond Pu'o, to the south of Halemaumau area, that whole south plank possibly moving, we're talking about an area that might be in a range of 10 or 15 miles long. Right? Even if it moves only a half a meter or, a tenth of a meter.
That's a lot of space.
That's a lot of space. Especially, it's clear, usually opens more to surface and less at depth. So you gotta, do that geometry as well. But still, we don't have a number is what it comes down to. And it could be a significant component, right?
And remember, it doesn't all come out. That missing magma, it's not like we're worried that it's on its way out somewhere. Most of it stays underground. It's just we would like to know more about where it went and what space is available to it.
Yeah. But for now, still, show me the magma.
Yep.
No magma, no eruption, right? So we still see red draining at Fissure 8, so the eruption is still going on. But, once that's just been draining down and down and down. And, I wouldn't be surprised if our pictures tomorrow morning, don't show us moving lava anymore. At some point in the next couple of days, that seems likely to happen if it didn't happen already today. So we'll just have to wait and see.
And that would start our 1 month counting to see if it's more than a month, then it's probably not going to start up again, is their general thinking about it. It's not always that way. So if once we don't see lava in Fissure 8, that's when they agree upon starting the clock, basically.
That's when the pause actually starts.
When the pause actually begins is when we no longer see the lava in there. But I gotta, play a little bit of devil's advocate again, though, because that intrusion, the blade of lava underground, they both described for me, that conduit, that pathway will stay molten for on the order of hundreds to thousands of years. It's totally feasible for more lava to be fed that way. But at this moment, like I said, we can flip a coin. Will it be able to do that? Will it actually go through from the summit through this conduit again in the next month? It's hard to say, but the space is available, and the volcano does have lots of lava left inside of it, and that's why we're puzzling about where is it? Can it get out this way? Will it come this way? And we have to wait and see to find more answers about that. We don't know where it is right now.
Yeah, and sometimes logic doesn't always lead us down the right path. If we look at historical events, we can say that the 55 eruption happened down here, and we obviously had a whole bunch of different fissures, and had obviously a big pathway to the surface from the 55 area of intrusion. But in 1960, 5 years later, the magma came and bypassed that whole pathway entirely, made a new pathway right by there, and passed it another 5 miles all the way to Kapoho, and erupted there instead. And that was another huge open pathway, and it eventually closed up and wasn't reused again either.
Abruptly, yeah.
So I mean, it's, you know, we're trying to use logic to give us the best possible, you know, outlook on this, but you know, we do get surprised sometimes, right? So like, it's really impossible to predict. We're just trying to talk it through so you guys can understand what we're looking at, you know, and that's why, you know, I personally keep saying that, you know, Lower Puna is an area that erupts so often. It's because of this exact dynamic that keeps happening over and over again. You know, so whether it uses the same pathway or it doesn't really matter.
Right.
You know, you know, how often lava comes out of the ground down here, maybe it doesn't matter that much. You know, lava has always had a chance to come out of the ground here, and unfortunately it didn't for a long time, and now it has. And a possibility of it coming out of the ground here is going to exist, you know, the rest of our lives for sure, without any doubt.
Yeah, but I can add a caveat to that, is that at this moment, in the kind of middle of the road, the average assumptions that USGS makes, you know, if we don't go through, until we go through that month waiting to see if it's a pause or if it's over, it's more likely at this moment that it's a pause. It's more likely that it will start again, in their view, you know. But if we get through this month of waiting, then it'll become more and more likely that it's over, that it's POW. So
right,
that's a caveat to that time frame.
Yeah, for sure, you know. But I think just like a corner, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to declare something dead before it actually is, and so you might err on a side of waiting longer to make sure it actually is dead.
Yeah.
So you don't upset the family, for example, and everyone who's waiting to find out.
Yeah.
So, you know, it doesn't mean that the coroner, you know, just because it declares, you know, the death 48 hours later doesn't mean a person actually died then. They might have still died this time you thought they did.
Right.
You just don't declare it till later, because that's the prudent, moral, responsible thing to do.
Yeah, well, I feel you. And so, well, then you should describe, because at this moment, like you were saying, we have no heartbeat, right? We have no
blood pressure.
No blood pressure. There's some gas coming out, but it's not really much of a breath. And what's the other vital sign? Heat. There's a little bit of body heat still. But yeah, so in that analogy, it's actually pretty beautiful analogy. They might be dead anyway, but when will we announce them dead? That's the debate with the officiating government science body, USGS. So
that's an interesting analogy. It's not mine. I won't take credit for it. I'm not sure that the USGS scientist was ready to share that. You know, as a view of the USGS. That's just one way to think of it. You know, basically, you know, it's going to be gassing for a long time after eruption's over. So that part of it maybe, you know, doesn't quite translate in our analogy, you know, and, you know, the heat, we've talked briefly among ourselves, you know, but a couple examples of, like, you know, how long heat can last. And one extreme example is Kīlauea, where after 40 years of eruption being over, there is still red lava inside of that, what ended up being a 440-foot thick pad of lava. We don't have anything of this size now, but we have, you know, an order of, what did USGS say at the Kapoho? 40 meters thickness of Kapoho, yeah. Right? And so they said, you know, with that kind of thickness compared to Makaupuhi crater, which had a lava pond in it that they studied, you know, Kapoho, the area of Kapoho with that thick pad of lava, there can be hot molten lava inside of that in the core for decades. If you drilled down in Kapoho, you would hit hot lava pocket down there, what will last for many years. And that's amazing. It's amazing
how it insulates from the lava on there.
Yeah, so the thicker the flow, the longer it stays hot.
Yeah.
And the more likely it is that after some time you still can drill down and find hot lava in there. Not hot lava, but liquid lava. It's all hot.
Yeah, it's all
hot. So that's important for those of you who are trying to consider, what's the realistic possibility of them, rebulldozing the road towards that area where you might have your property, right? And, that hopefully is a reality check, just straight up, like how long there's going to be liquid lava under there, how long it's going to be, it may not be that you can put a road through there for a long time. Yeah, you might have to, kind of consider at least the path of the fissure 8 flow in particular, right? That long-lasting 2-month flow that made the thickest pieces of land, right? Remember, it's the thicker ones that hold the heat and heat the lava liquid the longest.
Right.
So the thinner ones, not as big an issue. They'll stay hot for a long time, but they'll actually get solid, and then you can actually do something with that, just like the escape road out of the chain of craters that was bulldozed within 2 months of the flow being actually over. Right.
Which you mentioned that probably parts of the fissure 8 channel are so deep that there might be pockets of lava under the crust there for up to years.
Yeah, certainly, I would say
and
that's true,
easily, which is amazing. The scale of that fissure 8 lava channel is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And so it'll take parts of it might have hot lava for years. It's just amazing. So
yeah, so that'll be interesting because we'll learn more about what we've watched as we see that thing kind of cool down, which spots stay hot the longest, which ones the gas comes out persistently of. That'll kind of tell us more about the channel that we weren't able to see when it was actually flowing in all liquid red. So that'll be interesting to kind of see and scope out as we get photographs as the landscape continues to evolve and cool and reveal its secrets of what happened under the flow right there.
Yeah, we can use this wait and see moment to just be kind of amazed about what we're waiting and seeing. The volcano has done its work at this point, and of course we want to know what's going to happen next, but it can be kind of a moment where you just appreciate, wow, the impact of all of this, the scale of it is so huge, how much we're going to continue to learn as we explore this new world that has happened from the flow. It's so rather than being anxious about this wait and see moment, just think about how much we're learning from it, every moment that we're waiting to see. So
yeah, awesome. So maybe I can take a couple of questions, but we're going to wrap it up here pretty quick. Are there meters and monitors all over the volcanoes on the Big Island? Yes, there are. They're all over the place. So we're kind of just picking the ones that are relevant to our story, without kind of boring you guys with the ones that don't matter as much, or show the same thing over and over and over again. As far as the park's long-term stance has been that once the earthquakes stopped for a full 2 weeks, that then it would then begin sending staff back in to assess the damage and carry out repairs that they've hopefully been planning for already this whole time. So I think that it's later this week, a couple more days, we'll be at 2 weeks since the last big earthquake, and maybe that's when the park will start cranking up into action. I did hear that KMC is also already starting to go in there and clean up a little bit.
Oh, cool.
So we'll see, because they want to be open as soon as possible, as a business within the park, obviously. That's not surprising. As far as the time it will take to repair and fix things until at least one small part is open, that's still questions up in the air. There are several talk stories scheduled with the park superintendent Cindy Orlando beginning this week. I believe beginning on Thursday. I forget the other days, but I'm gonna say it's maybe a Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I can look it up here while I talk to you guys. But basically, the first one we can report more later. Also, the first one is in Pahoa on Thursday at the Tin Shack Bakery.
Yep.
And I don't remember the time right now, but
I think it's 3 p.m.
3 p.m. All right. Thank you.
Pretty sure.
I don't have it on this device over here. I think I saved the dates on the phone that I'm using to broadcast, so I can't tell you guys. Look it up right now for you guys. But we'll tell you guys more about that as it approaches. So that's basically the deal in the park. But it's once they get in there, this week, they can expect, I would say, realistically at least a month before they actually have a chance to have fixed the minimum required to fix and like assess the minimum required to assess and do something about it. So it's not going to happen yet, basically. And we'll have a much better idea when we have a chance to listen to Cindy Orlando and ask her what exactly is going to be the protocol they're going to follow, and what their plans are so far. I'm sure that she's coming out to try to encourage the community about the park that is so dear to all of us, right? So okay, so let me see if I have a couple other questions. What signals would indicate refilling the summit crater? Inflation will be the main one that we're looking for at this point. And not just any inflation, but I'm going to go out there and say I need to see at least 5 microradians, maybe 10 microradians of inflation to believe it's not something else, and it's going to be definitely something like magma.
Yeah,
so
it needs to be consistent. It needs to inflate for a consistent time and stay also, inflated afterward as well. So, a little time has to pass to see that happening. So
right, for sure. Actually, while I'm at it, I did have a question earlier today about what a typical, what that might actually look like. I don't think I have that one on here either. Actually, I do. I have it through here. I can show you guys.
Yeah, demonstrate at the right scale, the scale we're talking about.
Right, so I'm going to show you guys here is a historical tilt plot. This is from the summit, and it starts from 1957, the end of 57 right there, going through 1960 eruption to about 1962. All right, so as usual, our scale is on the left. This is our familiar scale of deformation now, plus 100 to minus 300 microradians there. So you can see here, I've actually have some labels on here. We actually have a slow inflation between 57 and 59, and 59 was a Kīlauea eruption, which you guys can see happen right there. Quite often with summit eruptions, you don't see a big deflation. You see some deflation, but not like the huge magma leaving the summit area deflation. So that was here. The magma actually goes to Kīlauea, and that's when the summit starts to deflate. And you can see it deflated by what looks like, not quite to 100 to down below 300. So we're looking at almost, between 300 and 400 microradians of deflation. So that's, on the same scale as what we're looking at now. And you guys can see that there was a period of kind of flat or slight deflation through here, right? We don't have very much resolution. There's only 2 points. But then it starts reinflating an order of hundreds of microradians again. Okay, so like that is super convincing, right? Not even just 5 or 10, but we're looking at what, it starts off as, 5 or 10, builds to be 100, 200, 300. Not to say it's going to go in the exact same pattern, but like that would be something convincing, something like that, right? And in 1960, we had, maybe a quarter of the year of doing this kind of, not exactly a pause in this case, right? Because we're calling these separate eruptions because enough time passed between this event over here and what ended up being the next one at the summit over here and the next one at the summit over here. We're calling these all separate eruptions, right? Mm. So the terminology, is can kind of change, but that will be the signal kind of thing to look for, right? And as I included this other picture for people who was talking about this as well. This is a 1960 collapse to show you guys. So here's Hale Mau, and within Hale Mau, we have the collapse on the inside, within what was the little lava pond from before there. So this is a much smaller collapse, even like a baby collapse compared to what we've seen now.
Yep. And so it was much larger volume extruded onto the surface compared to the collapse in that case.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So the dynamics are quite different, but just, since we have so little to go on, I'll show you one example of how this went in the past. and how it might go. So our big question now is like, how long is this going to take? Are we going to have one of these things coming up right away? Is it going to stay flat till here? Is it going to stay flat for longer? Is it going to do something different? That's what we're having to look for. We basically have come on this kind of model as far as here.
Yep.
And now we need to look at what comes after that, right? Mm-hmm. So that's another way to look at that. Mm-hmm. So, okay, maybe a couple more questions. I see some comments in there. We don't have anything to say about other volcanoes at this point, besides Kīlauea.
We'll get sick of, if nothing's changing, we'll just talk about other volcanoes for a while.
Yeah, well, the question is always what's happening in Mauna Loa and what's happening at Loihi, and basically not nearly as much as is happening over here. So, well, I see a comment here from Kathy. I'm sorry that happened to your grandma. I wasn't trying to bring me bad memories about the coroner when I told the coroner analogy right there. So that's troubling. But you guys see why it's such a sensitive thing for the person in charge of declaring whether the thing is still alive or dead. Yeah. So let's see. Some good comments in here, but we're discuss Fisher 17 in a future broadcast when we can give you guys some more details about that.
Fisher 17?
17, someone asked about 17.
Yeah, I definitely want to see that show.
Yeah.
Fisher 17 is the most interesting Fisher.
That's going to be your show, man, so you're going to see it.
We'll talk more about it. I want to learn more, too.
Right? So, okay. And so, okay, we'll also talk about, I've been promising you guys kind of big picture dynamics of hotspots and all of that in the future. And so
that would be great to go over.
I'll do that at some point. Maybe this lull pause will last long enough that we can go into some details about hotspot theory and magma generation and all of that stuff, And, of course, my take just kind of briefly on that is that it's kind of a different cycle and time length and, just scale overall than what we see at the surface. I almost kind of see the surface as having its own paradigm and then the deeper part having its own paradigm. They obviously do connect. But what's happening way down there is not affecting us directly on the surface as much as a surface paradigm of what we've been discussing in the past 3 months, which clearly applies. And this, well, you guys can decide if what we said applies or not. And if it didn't apply, you're probably not watching us anymore, right? So, so there you go. And Pu'o'o maybe is the last thing we can address.
Okay.
So Pu'o'o, John talked about this yesterday. Was it just yesterday? It's in the days we run together now. That the conduit is probably so collapsed and blocked that there is probably no path out there, but there was a lot of magma storage area beneath Pu'o'o. And one thing I heard today was interesting from a USGS scientist is that the fact that we see so much gas still coming out of Pu'o'o does suggest there is still some fairly stable pathway from that magma source to the surface, right? But could you get the magma out is the question now that you have a bypass built past Pu'o'o to Leilani, right? But the fact that the gas is there, and in fact maybe the most gas rich part of the whole eruption right now is noteworthy, and the only way that we could imagine it possibly reactivating, is that if we somehow clog that lower part between Pu'o'o and Leilani, but erupt soon enough, so we just got to wait long enough to clog that part, but not long enough to clog the upper part, which is more well established, and keep that chimney open during this time, despite the fact we may have more collapses happening if we have a long time period going on, as we described previously. And then you possibly could have a situation where you could have something happen at Pu'o'o, but most of us don't think the odds of that are good at all, right? There are so many things, so many if this, and this, and this, and this, and this, that it seems that's a pretty long shot. Could happen. It could happen. But
We have it from the scientist in charge tonight that she would also be surprised if lava went back to Pu'uo for these reasons. So it was kind of nice to have her weigh in on it, like, well, it might happen, but there's if. And so it was interesting to hear that her take on it was very similar. So
Yeah, so for sure. So, all right, guys, and we're going to leave you at that tonight. We'll come back and talk more over the coming days and get into all the details. But that's what we believe you guys need to know tonight. You know, basically as a, I don't know, we're taking a role of town crier almost tonight, you know, like it's 10 o'clock and all is well.
yeah.
Tonight, we'll see about tomorrow, right?
Yeah, we'll see.
And that's where we stand. So thank you guys, and on behalf of John and myself, let me kind of spin these things around here. So we will sign off with our typical
Stay classy,
Puna.
Puna.
Aloha.
Aloha.